She unalived a toddler because she put ketchup in a toilet. The sad case of 3-year-old Hannah Wessey. Trigger warning. Hannah was born January 11, 2015 to her mother Adrian and her father Jason. Now because Adrian was using drugs during her pregnancy, Hannah was born with heroin in her system. Hannah was lucky to be alive. It was a miracle, and she was soon allowed to go home with her father. Eventually, Adrian was arrested for possession and selling heroin, so she wasn't a big part of Hannah's life, and Jason was left a single father of 3 children. The family struggled and went through some really hard times, but Jason remained hopeful that things would get better for his family. When Hannah was 4 months old, Jason lost his job. Jason was already a father of 2 and didn't have anywhere to stay. He took Hannah to his brother's house, and while she slept inside, he slept in his car. This went on for 2 years. He did everything he could for his daughters. When he found a construction job in Hanover Township and a new home, he worked 12-hour days to provide for his family. So now that Jason was working full-time again, he had to find a good, credible babysitter to watch his youngest daughter, Hannah. So Jason found out one of his new neighbors, Lindsay Parton, was a babysitter, and she had a great reputation within their community. Lindsay had an associate degree in preschool education, she was a mother of 2, and she did babysitting on the side to earn extra cash. And Lindsay lived with her children's father, T.J. Smith, who the community also deemed a good man and a good father. They had a home, job, education. Their family had stability, and that was what Jason wanted for his own family. The two clicked right away, and Jason watched as his daughter grew closer to Lindsay. And Lindsay babysitted Hannah for 8 months straight with no known issues. March 8, 2018, Jason dropped Hannah off at Lindsay's house like he'd done so many times before, and he headed off to work. Within minutes of dropping Hannah off, Jason received a frantic phone call from Lindsay claiming Hannah had just collapsed into the floor and she didn't know why and didn't know what to do. So Jason, of course, rushed back to Lindsay's house, found his daughter on the floor, and they called 911. In the 911 call, Lindsay is overheard saying, "Hannah was just fine. She just collapsed in the floor. I don't know what happened." And Lindsay kept telling Hannah that she loved her. Trigger warning, the case and pictures will be more graphic from here. Hannah was rushed to the hospital and immediately put on life support as doctors tried to figure out what was wrong with her. Hannah had severe blunt force trauma to her head, a black eye, and bruising down her face and chin. There were other injuries throughout her body that were in various stages of healing. Hannah's skull was cracked and her brain was swelling, so doctors did whatever they could to quickly relieve that pressure. Hannah had sustained injuries that were consistent with a car crash. The doctors immediately recognized Hannah's injuries as child abuse, and they reported that to the police. So as Hannah laid in the hospital fighting for her life, police called Lindsay in for questioning. In Lindsay's first interview, she told the police that Hannah had just collapsed and she didn't know why, so she was later released and allowed to go home. But as the police got more medical evidence from the doctors, they called Lindsay back in the next day for another interview. This is where Lindsay's story begins to change, and I shit you not, she told the police more than 5 different stories. Investigators asked, how did Hannah end up with a black eye and bruising on her chin? Lindsay said Hannah had fallen down the day before, hitting her face on a toy train set on the floor. The investigator said, your story is not matching her injuries. Then she said Hannah was walking towards the door when she fell about 12 inches, hitting her head on the gravel. Investigators said, look, doctors already told us that Hannah has a cracked skull and serious bruising on her body. And we think there's something more serious, more traumatic that happened that you're not telling us. Now Lindsay claimed she was walking through the door while holding Hannah on her left hip. And she tripped going through the door on one of Hannah's blankets, and they both fell out together, and she landed on top of Hannah, and that she actually hit her head on the door as well as Hannah hitting her head on the ground. Lindsay said Hannah was screaming and crying for her father, so she picked Hannah up and began shaking her and squeezing her as hard as she could, and she said that Hannah's head was flopping back and forth. She said at some point she may have accidentally dropped Hannah back on the ground but couldn't remember. The investigator said, okay, but where did Hannah get all those different injuries that were in various stages of healing? Those are older injuries. She then claimed in prior days she found Hannah in the bathroom squirting ketchup down the toilet, and when she seen her, she lost her temper and attacked Hannah. Damn bitch, it wasn't her fault you weren't watching her. You should have been doing your damn job. Lindsay says she also got mad when Jason dropped Hannah off. Hannah began crying, begging him not to leave her there, and when he left, she attacked Hannah again. Lindsay said she had even uppercutted Hannah with a straight fist, lifting Hannah up off the ground. And that was how Hannah got bruising on her face, especially on her chin. Lindsay said days prior to Hannah's death, Jason asked her about a bruise, but she lied to him claiming Hannah had fallen down when she had actually hit her. Jason said, I had no idea she was abusing my daughter. Every time we pulled up at her house, Hannah would jump out the car and run up to her front door with so much excitement, until that last day when she started crying and asked me to stay. Lindsay confessed to the police in the prior days to Hannah's death, she had punched, slapped, shoved, squeezed, and shook Hannah as hard as she could. Lindsay told the police she'd been going through a lot of stress between relationship issues, financial issues, and an alleged miscarriage. But the police did not think that was her motive. They believed she was angry with Jason because he owed her money for babysitting fees. So Lindsay was arrested for assault and child endangerment, and she was taken to jail. But Lindsay would post bond later that day and be released. But the police got a search warrant to go through her devices, and that was where they found, the day before Hannah was put in the hospital, Lindsay had searched how to get rid of a bruise, and then she deleted that Google search. Hannah was surrounded by her family as she fought for 10 long days, but sadly on March 18th, she passed away from her injuries. Hannah's funeral was held on March 22nd, and the entire community came out to remember her and celebrate her life. And now Hannah's case had turned into a homicide case, and Lindsay would go to trial in April of 2019. So she was out of jail for a good year before they even went to trial for this. But then just 1 month after her trial started, her spouse was arrested for SA. TJ was charged with 2 counts of R-wording 2 different children under the age of 10 and 4 counts of gross sexual imposition. He pled guilty to lesser charges, but he had access to a lot of kids, so I wonder how many victims does he really have? So now armed with a whole new story, her trial began, and she went after Hannah's father. Lindsay claimed the police coerced and pushed her into confessing because they didn't want to prosecute Jason for his own daughter's death. I watched her interrogation on YouTube, and if anything, these cops were too damn nice to her. Lindsay and her attorney did everything they could to make Jason look like an abusive, horrible father. Now she claims Jason had dropped Hannah off that morning wearing a hoodie to cover her head, and how she's seen bruising all over Hannah but didn't tell anyone. Lindsay claimed the reason she didn't say nothing about this before is because she was trying to protect Jason, a man she barely knew. She's lying like hell because she didn't even work that hard to protect her own children's father when he was arrested. Now, even though her claims do not match up with any of the evidence, her family truly believes that she is innocent and Jason did this to his daughter. But it doesn't matter what her family and friends think. All the evidence points towards Lindsay. When the police asked Lindsay to take a lie detector test, she flat out refused and said hell no. Meanwhile, they asked Jason. He said sure and passed his. She admitted Hannah's blunt force trauma happened while at her house in her care. And based on their phone logs, there was no way Jason was in that house when his daughter was injured. She told police exactly where she hit this child, which was exactly where these bruises were in the days before Hannah's death. She didn't call 911 until Jason arrived. In one of her first police interviews, she can be heard muttering, "I'm going to prison for the rest of my life." Now, at this point of the trial, Lindsay and her attorney demanded her confession and interrogation tapes be thrown out of court because they did not want the jury seeing that. She also didn't want the jury to know that she had lied to the police so many times. Those tapes were damning. But the judge ruled that those confession tapes would be shown to the jury. She was seen laughing and smirking all throughout her trial. But here's what got me the most about this case. Lindsay's cousin and good friend had the balls to ask the judge to be lenient with her so she could be with her children. Her cousin said, "She's innocent. She didn't do this. She's a good mother, and she's the only one who remembers my birthday every year." Then Lindsay's friend, Andrea Corey, tells the judge, "Don't ruin her life over this. Give her a lenient sentence. She's a good person." Girl, ain't nobody ruined her life but her. Don't you put that burden on anyone else. After watching one of those interrogation tapes, a damn goldfish would know she's guilty. They even made a Facebook page for her called Lindsay Pardon is Innocent, and they want her released from jail. Lindsay begged the judge for leniency and said that she misses her daughter so much and dreads going to sleep every night because when she wakes up, her children aren't there. Well, imagine how Jason and Adrian feel, being that you unalived their child. At least you'll get to talk to your daughters. At least you can write letters, phone calls, emails. They will never speak to their child again. So, of course, it didn't take a jury long to find her guilty. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, but she does have the possibility of parole after serving 18 years. Now she's blaming her lawyer, claiming they didn't do a good enough job representing her in court. Lindsay has filed several appeals, but none of them have been approved. Now she demands a new trial, attorney, and judge. She blames everyone but herself. Jason said, "I hope she never gets paroled, and I hope she spends the rest of her life in prison and is treated the same way she treated my daughter." I know a lot of people don't like Adrian, Hannah's mother, because she abused drugs and wasn't a big part of Hannah's life. But can I just say, she read a beautiful victim impact statement on behalf of Hannah at Lindsay's sentencing. Now let's take a moment to remember 3-year-old Hannah Wessey. She was a fighter and so strong. She was a miracle baby from day one. She fought hard to live. Hannah grew into a bright young toddler with a real zest for life. She loved to play, and she was her dad's entire world. One of her favorite things to do was cuddle up, eat cereal, and watch TV with her daddy. Hannah was always a daddy's baby. One of the hardest things about this is knowing I will never hear her little laugh again. Hannah loved her family, but she especially adored her big sisters. Caitlin said, "I can't believe my little sister was taken away. It feels like my heart is cramped up hurting."